We got a lot of developments today. The United States diplomats have encountered their Russian counterparts in Saudi Arabia, while the European Union was really upset that it wasn't invited to the prom. I gotta say, the reality check, the cold shower that the European Union is getting is absolutely wonderful. I mentioned this on my main channel, but I don't think that the European Union is like a high school girl with big tits. You know, like one of those mean girls in high school, like they're absolutely stunning looking, but they don't actually offer anything of value. Like they're not, like if you take this girl on a project, like let's say on a math project, like she's not contributing, she's not doing shit. If you take her on the sports team, she can't kick the ball. If you ask her to produce something, she cannot, right? Like all she has is that she's got big tits and an attitude. And the reason I'm saying this is like you look at the European Union. Our manufacturing capability is non-existent compared to China, compared to the United States, compared to the other powers of the world, right? So we don't really manufacture stuff. We don't really innovate when it comes to AI. We're not making new groundbreaking technology when it comes to AI, to spacefaring, to anything like that, right? So we don't innovate. That's what China and the United States are doing. We do have like the first regulation for AI in the world. We do have that. We don't have a military. We don't have like strong political alliances. We're not Israel, right? Like Israel actually knows people in high places. Like Israel can actually tell America, hey, your interests and ours don't align. Can we fix that, right? Europe doesn't have that. So what we have is like high arrogance. It's like, oh, but we want to be at the table. It's like, yeah, you want to be at the table, but like, what do you bring, right? So like a girl with big tits, the only thing that Europe has is to be plundered. That's it. To be used and abused. Because they're not bringing anything of value. Hopefully that will change, like hopefully the European Union can produce some strong statesmen, some strong leaders that will navigate the upcoming geopolitical storm. But until then, it's going to be used and abused by all the other countries in the world. There's idiots who are saying MAGA withdrawing from NATO makes them traitors to America because it's in my Russia interest, as if it's an oath to NATO. America will not withdraw from NATO. I personally don't think, because there's a lot of politicians that are grifting insanely hard from NATO, number one. It would take a Congress decision. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's a Congress decision to withdraw from NATO, so like it just is going to be declared unconstitutional. And number two, NATO is actually required for America to be the world's hegemon. Like, Americans just don't understand that if the United States starts being the world hegemon, your standard of living will actually be below that of the Europeans. You need to be able to control all of the trade routes in the world in order to be able to dominate everyone. Like, right, and you don't need the military to do that. Like, look how you're putting the European Union in its place. Like, how are you doing it? Like, we're going to tariff you. Right? So, like, no invasion, no boots on the ground, no soldier, no, just tariffs. And the European Union goes like, bow, 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 right? Like, that's why, because you control the waters, you control the trade lines, you set the tariffs, right? But like, if you weren't able to be the world hegemon, and let's say that China and Russia would, then China and Russia would be like, America, we're going to tariff the living shit out of you if you don't do this. And then you'd be like, bow, bow, bow. It's all about the trade routes. Like, who controls the little boat? This is why the United States goes absolutely apeshit when someone fucks with the little boat. Like, no matter the administration, whether it was Obama, whether it was Joe Biden, whether it's Trump, like, the moment you have, like, some individual with a more primal nature wanting to LARP as a pirate in Somalia and attacks the little boat, America brings the entire fucking empire over there. Like you bring, like, aircraft carriers, you bring naval destroyers. Like honestly, I'm looking at videos on Twitter, and you have, like, these little guys with a dinghy trying to fuck with a little boat, and then the Apache helicopter just arrives, and, like, literally nothing moves after that, Little boat is very important. It's literally the only way that you can piss off the entire United States of America. Just fuck with little boat. Because the moment the little boat gets fucked with, That's the moment that the standard of living of every single American, rich or poor, gets affected. And so that's why you're going to stay in NATO. It's because you need this to continue. You don't want someone else to have the little boat there. You want your little boat to be there. Simple. Excelsius, I need a bit of your wisdom, V. Check your DMs after the stream. Oh, after the stream. Well, hopefully I don't forget. Silver Camaro 78, idiots are saying MAGA is stabbing NATO in the back because after 9/11 they sent a symbolic number of troops to Afghanistan as if we never saved their butts. Well, the thing with there is actually a conversation here. You know, it's not about the troops, it's about the consent. The situation during 9/11 in the world was quite different. Europe actually had power in the world. Like, Europe actually had economic might comparable to that of the United States. And so, going into Afghanistan actually did require the consent of Europe. Because Europe could have always said, it's like, okay, well, we're going to start dealing with Russia now and start tariffing America. And you guys wouldn't like that. Because back then, you couldn't really do what you're doing today. And so the sending of troops, while symbolic, it was basically like where all of our hands get bloodied with this. That was the metaphor, right? It's like, well, we sent troops as well. We can't be held. We can't say that we're not responsible. Long live our Romanian troll emperor. Jesus, I wouldn't want to be an emperor, but thank you for being a member for 79 for 25 months. Sorry. The Dutch in Urzugan were gaslit into doing a building mission when America knew full well it was an active war zone. True. Thank you, Boog, for joining the chat. Now they are upset because they don't give free money to our taxes. Well, no, it's more like Europe needs to understand its place in the world and hopefully start to develop its own economy. Because right now it's absolutely strangled by bureaucracy, which doesn't seem to ever want to unwind and at least stop. Like, at this point, I'm not even saying, like, can the bureaucracy be taken back? It's like, can you stop it with it? Like, can you stop just making new laws? Before 9/11, Europe had things the world wanted, so the Europeans opened their borders and have been giving it all away. So generous. This is actually correct. Yeah, like, before 9/11, Europeans had stuff that the world wanted. Now we don't. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about the delegation, which took place between the United States and Russia, and it took place in Saudi Arabia, right? Very interesting. It didn't take place in China. It didn't take place in Europe. Didn't take place in Russia or America. It took place in Saudi Arabia. These things actually matter. In a geopolitical scale, like these tiny symbolic acts, they matter a lot for diplomacy. It basically says, we as Americans, we have our own allies. We're going to do our own stuff. We're not going to care what the European Union thinks. All right. Here's my take. What did they discuss? Well, they discussed more interesting things. Believe it or not, peace in Ukraine wasn't, in my opinion, the number one of the conversation. The number one event of the conversation was re-establishing relationships between the United States and Russia. Like, that was the main talking point. How do we normalize things? So, I wouldn't be surprised if Visa and MasterCard goes back to Russia, and we're going to see a lot of Russians on Twitch again. We're going to see Russians on YouTube having their channels remonetized. We're going to get Russians on the internet, chat. Going to fucking get Russians on the internet. The other thing that they discussed is American companies working with Russian gas companies again. We're going to notice that the rhetoric changes, at least online. It's not going to be okay to hate on Russians anymore. Because, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was like a seething hatred from the liberals towards the Russian people. Now, I understand why you can dislike the Russians. I too, dislike when Russians get together and form a government. Like, that is one of the greatest evils on earth. You know, the Russian government. But, like, the Russian citizens, no, like, they're absolutely fine. I think, like, every party can benefit from having a Russian there. Like, Russian people are really nice. individuals to party with. And yeah, no, like they're actually well, actually, I would say they're not nice to play Dota or Counter-Strike with. They're annoying because they don't speak English. They can speak English. This is what pisses me off. They can speak English. They just don't want to. But like outside of video games and forming governments, yeah, no, Russian people are really great. But like the liberals on the internet, like they showed us how to really hate. You know, like they go against hate speech and they don't like human hate, but like they're capable of giving you a lecture. Like they can start the university on how to hate, and you could get PhDs if you go there. And if it's not a liberal professor, they're not teaching it properly. They hated everyone. Like, you know, even like Russians that were in America got hate. They hated Russian cat breeders. Like, what the fuck did the cat breeders do to you? They hated Russian chess players. You know, like complete madness, absolute lunacy. And these are the same twats that go back and they moan about how America treated Japanese citizens during World War II. And I'm like, you know what? The difference between you and I is that I agree. Yeah, like America did treat Japanese prisoners of war pretty badly during World War II. And Japanese American citizens. Like Japanese American citizens were treated horribly during World War II. However, the difference between you and I is that I wouldn't do that again, but you guys would. You guys would be the first. Like, if the Biden administration would say we need to persecute Russian American citizens, they would line the fuck up. They would just sign up for the Gestapo. They would be like, can I be a prisoner guard over there? You know, can I be a guard at the complex? Can I? No longer allowed to hate on Russians. Poor crowd. The crowds actually like the Russians. This is something that people don't understand. The crowds actually spin based on how the US government spins. And so the crowds are really friendly with the Russians. Like the Nord Stream pipeline too. Does that look like an anti-Russian initiative? When their politicians get involved in scandals with Gazprom, does that look like they're anti-Russians? No, Germany likes Russians. I mean, they're good buddies. They fucked Poland together. You know, they went to a party when they both got extremists. And they went there and they raped Poland. And it's like, ever since, they're close friends. It's like, they're the guy that you went to a party with and did bad things to a girl. You know, it's like, they know each other's secrets, I guess. I don't fucking know. It's weird. But they have history between each other. George Washington didn't want to be president. No, George Washington should have been King Washington. He should have put that fucking crown on his head. And then we would have had like King Washington. Can you imagine how badass that would be? You'd have the Washington dynasty. There you got like Washington the 15th. EU has really weakened itself so much that if it really wanted to, the US could move in and declare it all a US territory. It's not so simple, man. Like, look. I understand, like, the gung-ho of shit, and it's like, oh, like, war is the final answer. You would need a naval invasion, which is actually very difficult to accomplish. But more importantly, you need to justify your war at home. Like, you need to convince the people in America that war with the European Union is what you guys need right now. And then you'd also need to take into account China and Russia and the fact that people have nukes. Yeah, not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. I'm like militarily speaking, life is not like a forex strategy game where you paint the map with your color. And even then, like, let's say you conquer European Union, what then? How do you keep it? You get guerrilla wars. You get people rising up, rebelling against you. Like, why would you even want it? Right? No, that's internet talk. Oh, their Kraut. Oh, I haven't watched Kraut NT. I know that he makes historical videos. I don't know his takes. I assume they're probably like the most pro-establishment, neoliberal takes you can imagine. So yeah, probably he doesn't like Russians. My brother in Christ, I said we could if we really wanted to, not that it would be easy. I generally don't think you could. You can ask ChatGPT about it, but I think it would be mutually assured destruction. Like, if you guys wanted to go into Europe, like, immediately Europe would ally with Russia, and probably China would join as well. Because it would be an unjustified conflict, so then every other nation on Earth would have a reason to declare cause belli against you. I don't think you could, actually. Like, America is the strongest military on the world, but it can't actually take on the whole world. No nation can. Like throughout human history, no one can take over the whole world. It never happened. Anyway. V is calling us out. We gotta invade. Hold on, let me drink some water and then we can continue. Also, take into account that the war of invasion, this is what Russia found out, right? Because it's like big country invades little country. Country with a lot of technology and people invades smaller country. Now, the ones that are invading are usually suffering like 1 out of 4 attrition. Assuming that the technology is comparable, right? Because like if you invade Afghanistan or Iraq, that doesn't count. But like usually you have like 1 out of 4 attrition. So like for each enemy killed, 4 die, right? This is what happens in a war of invasion. The attacker suffers losses. However, if you also take into account that there's an ocean between two countries, so like America attacking Europe, no. To be fair, you guys would be struggling with China as well. For the same reason, right? Like the attacker always gets more attrition than the defender. Humanity's history can't always account for the future. I think in this case it can. It's the math checks out. Anyway, moving back, right? So like they discussed normalization of relationships between the United States and Russia. The way I view it, and this is what the European Union doesn't understand, is that Trump is not negotiating peace for Europe. Trump is not negotiating peace for Ukraine. Trump is negotiating peace for the United States. That's how I view it. It's in the fucking name. It's Make America Great Again. They're actually negotiating the peace in America's interest. And so, like, if you look at the Ukrainian war, it's actually incredibly profitable for the United States. Like, let's say it ends with how Trump is suggesting, right? Like, let's say everything goes according to Trump's plan. Probably it won't, but let's analyze the situation. What does America get? Well, you guys get probably more money than you borrowed through mining of the Ukraine's rare earth minerals, right? So right now, the problem is with China because they're competing for the world hegemony, and China has a lot of rare earth minerals that are required to make technology, and is now setting an embargo, like a flat-out ban, for these minerals to reach the United States. And so if the United States can secure rare earth minerals from a different part of the world, like Ukraine, then that's a win, right? So basically, if Trump gets his way, you guys get every single penny that you invested, you get it back through the mining of minerals. Russia has lost the Bashar al-Assad regime. Like, while it was focused in Ukraine, because this was actually the main goal of this whole thing, I don't think it was to help Ukraine win. And I don't think it was to let Russia win either. It was to continue the conflict for as much as possible, to cause attrition for Russia, and to force Russia to be there rather than other parts of the world. And so you guys managed to take down the Bashar al-Assad regime. You guys managed to cripple Russia's economy. You guys managed to force Russia to stop selling to the European Union, and instead you sold your own liquefied gas. You guys managed to test a lot of your cool toys. You guys managed to realize how modern warfare is like. No one knew that it's going to be trench warfare with drones. Like, people were still investing in planes and in ships and stuff. And it seems like, no, that's not how modern war is fought. It's kind of like World War I with drones. It's horrible. And so, America got a lot from this. You managed to cripple Europe. Like, blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, destabilizing the relationships between Europe and Russia. And so, like when you look at it, like, America hasn't lost a single soldier in this, right? Like, the only thing you lost is money. Russia lost a lot of people. Ukraine lost a lot of people. Russia also lost politically. Like, it's not a superpower anymore. Like, it couldn't actually take Kiev. Like, for a superpower, that's fucking embarrassing. Like, imagine if America tried to take Mexico and you can't, no. So, what we're going to see is the actual on the Ukrainian side they won because they kept the country. A lot of people that are now trying to spin this in Russia's favor. It's like, well, Russia never wanted to take Kiev. That's not true. After the invasion, I think it's like literally 2 weeks after the invasion, you have an official Russian newspaper that's pretty much like the regime's PR, publishing an article that was up there for like 30 minutes or so before taken down, but people took screenshots and archived it, where they actually claimed victory in Ukraine, and they were saying that the purpose is the redrawing of the borders of the Russian Empire because the Ukrainians are our brothers, just like the people from Belarus. Like, how did you think we would allow them to join the West and blah, 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 right? So, like, that was the initial plan. Now that the plan doesn't work, they went, oh, no, we're just trying to denazify. Now I even heard, like, certain Russian shills saying that, oh, we didn't even want to take down Zelensky. It's like, oh, come on. No, like, all in all, Russia failed its objectives because the border with NATO became larger. They didn't manage to take Ukraine, right? Like, Kiev is still not under Russian occupation. They lost a lot of young men. And not just the ones that died from the war. They lost, actually, rich people that fled the country because they didn't want to get drafted. Like, I remember the airplanes in the first months of invasion. Like, the Russians were fleeing and taking their capital with them. Like, who fled? The rich people that could afford it. The European Union loses the most, right? It loses prestige. It lost the Nord Stream pipeline. It spent a lot of money that maybe it's not going to get back. It's probably going to have to send military presence in Ukraine. So yeah, like if the war ends now with Trump's plan, America only wins. He is negotiating on behalf of America. Unfortunately, we don't have strong statesmen in Europe to negotiate on behalf of Europe. It is what it is. At the end of the day, I do think that the way Trump views it, like he actually said, this wasn't a war between Ukraine and Russia. He views it as a cold proxy war between the US and Russia, where America didn't actually want to fight Russia, but like if Russia did the mistake and went into Ukraine, thinking that they're going to surrender the same way that they surrendered in Crimea, and you can know that this happened because they invaded during the mud season. Like, they didn't expect resistance. They only expected people to cheer them on and open the gates for them. America, well, if you're going to play stupid, I mean, of course we're going to take advantage of it. Like, why the fuck not? Like, how much is it costing us? Oh, taxpayer money. Do we lose American soldiers? No. Okay, fuck it. Can we push Europe into this? Yeah, okay, push Europe into this as well. Make them decouple from Russia so that they can buy our gas. Like, from an American perspective, everything makes sense. I can tell you, right? Because like if you go on YouTube, there's like two types of people right now. There's like a group. When you look at the Russian war, the Russian-Ukrainian war, you have like two types of individuals. You have individuals that are extremely pro-Russian, and you listen to their channel, and it's like, the green t-shirt has decided to invade Ukraine. My friends, this is a mistake of a colossal proportion. Why is the green t-shirt moving his forces over here when instead he should have moved them over there? If I was a general, and obviously my brilliant strategic military mind, I would have done things. But in reality, the reason the green t-shirt is doing this is because he wants to appear on the television. He wants to convince the European Union leaders that he needs more money. Ha ha ha. Right? Like, basically, you're expecting that any day now, complete Russian victory, complete Russian dominance, right? And then you go onto another channel, and it's like, Russia is in complete disarray. Their North Korean troops have proven to be a catastrophic collapse. A friendly fire going on. It's Complete destruction to the Russian economy. Everyone is dying all of a sudden. Their equipment malfunctioning. They're bringing donkeys and they're bringing horses to drag the munitions. Any day now we can expect Zelensky to plant the Ukrainian flag over the Kremlin. I don't know how Russia even exists as a country anymore. They are absolutely incompetent. Complete corruption through every single level of the military, you know? And this is like what you get. Like, you watch one video and you get one thing. You watch another video and you get another thing. And then the moment you have your personal take, like you're looking at what's happening and you have an opinion, it's like, V is lying. He is pushing the propaganda of the enemy. You do not understand, V. You are brainwashed. The ideology has peered into your neurons. Either Putin or Joe Biden is there struggling for the very existence of your brain. I have been to the front, V. I have talked with the soldiers. I have seen it with my own eyes, and I know that you are just pushing for deception. Your tongue is like a forked snake going into the airwaves, V. You do not understand the might of the Russian people. They are a strong military might that in reality could dominate the world tomorrow if they wanted to. But they are just showing restraint, V. You do not understand that from Putin oozes compassion and empathy. He could just be in Romania right now if he wanted to. But he is a very calm and patient man. And you just fail to see in his wisdom and bask into his everlasting glory, you know? Like, fuck me, dude. I genuinely don't give a shit about propaganda. I don't listen to what people talk. I listen to what people say, to what people do, right? So what am I seeing that's happening right now? Putin wants peace. If he is the strongest military might of generations, right? Like all of our ancestors together have committed a shamanic sacrificial ritual in order to create the emperor of mankind, which is Putin himself, leading the armies of Mother Russia in a world conquest. Okay, if he is that person, why the fuck isn't he taking Kiev? Why is he even talking with America? He'd actually be like, you know what, America, go fuck yourself. I'm going to take Ukraine. You're not going to take any of the resources. Those are our resources, and you're going to beg us for them. Bring all of your might. Bring all of your troops. We're going to fuck them up. Why isn't he like that, right? Like, this is how you talk when you have big balls. Right? Like, when you have big balls, when you have cojones, and you know the situation on the ground better than I do, and better than any other YouTuber does, if you know you're winning, you're not going to come, peace negotiate. No, you're going to fuck off. We're going to take this land. It's our fucking land. And you're going to suck dick. Why isn't he doing that? Huh? If his economy is so strong, because I understand, like, the Russian economy has recovered, and it is better than ever before. It's like Red Alert 3. They build the factories, you click there, and the tanks just keep spamming, and it's like the Zerg. It's like the fucking Zerg, like, underneath the ground, the Russian hatcheries just constantly pump more soldiers, and it's like, really? I don't know, like, maybe it is, but, like, if that's the case, I don't see it in Putin's negotiation strategy. The Emperor. Finally, someone who guessed the Russian took major loss too. I never thought the Russians actually care about NATO expansion, or else they wouldn't start wars that scares country into joining. Well, okay, it's actually really complicated if you talk about Russia as, like, external policy, because the thing with Russia... all right, I'll tell you my take on this. A lot of people look at modern nations and they think they're democracies. They're not. Modern nations are pretty much the same like they used to be in medieval times. And when I look at Russia, I look at it like the same imperial Tsarist Russia that it used to be. It's like I'm not saying like an empire, but more like the mindset of imperial Tsarist place, right? Like, do you understand what I mean? Like a kingdom. Well, actually like an empire. And the way they view things is like, once the emperor dies, once the Romanov passes away, the new emperor gets to have like a completely different foreign policy. And so like they don't really think in the sense of what will happen in 100 years. Right? Like the new emperor takes the throne, And he has like his own vassals and his own internal struggles and shit like that, and his own factions vying for power. But like externally, they all have their own vision. They all have like their different takes. You know, in some places they're like, okay, let's be more friendly to China. In other places, let's be more aggressive to China. Let's be more friendly towards the West. It really depends, right? And so, like, in my opinion, with the current one, with Vladimir Putin, he was actually a pretty Western president for what else Russia can offer. Like, a lot of people want Putin to go away, and you may get a better president, you know, you may get a president that's more sympathetic to the West, sure. But chances are you're going to get a president that's more difficult to bargain with. And so, who knows, you know, usually it's also about how well can the president control the different factions. It's like an empire, right? Like in an empire, you also had a deep state, which were the higher nobles. Kind of like Game of Thrones, right? Like imagine Game of Thrones is made by R.R. Martin, who is a historian that really understands these conflicts, right? So like just because you're King Joffrey doesn't mean shit if you can't actually get the Lannisters and the Starks and all of those to work together, right? Now, if you actually have a king, like a president that can get the factions to work together, so you can unite the Starks with the Lannisters, with all of that, then you can have a very strong external policy. Because once you secure what happens inside, then you can swing your big fat cock outside of your country. Examples of people that can do this seem to be, number one is the Sultan, right? Like the president of Turkey, Erdogan. Like he seems to have completely dominated the internal diplomacy of Turkey. So like now he can swing his big fat cock around as much as he wants. Putin is another. I think Trump actually managed to. Trump managed because in his first term, he didn't manage to have the House, the Senate, and the White House, and the Supreme Court. So this is why Trump is so fucking aggressive. It's because up until now, like let's say, you don't have like your internal conflicts set in order. And you start shit with someone else. You start shit with China. Well, all that China has to do is to start funding one of the enemy factions, like someone that doesn't like you. And then you have problems at home, right? So like, to go back to our analogy with Game of Thrones, right? Like you go against the Bank of Bravos, and the Bank of Bravos starts funding the Baratheons. Right? That's why it's important to have your things in order. But yeah, America is actually an interesting nation because I do believe America is a genuine democracy in the sense that I can't treat it as an empire. America is more like a corporation, to be honest. Like if you look at its history, the American mindset is line goes up. Like America, in some places, not all, but like California, right? Is just a plot of land where economic transactions happen. And this is not something that is happening now. It's something that happened in the past as well. Like, for instance, during the Great Depression, you guys had a phenomenally high number of Germans coming in order to do the jobs that, quote-unquote, no one else wanted to do. And what the Germans did, because, like, a lot of people will say, well, yeah, but, like, German were white people. It's like, okay, what the Germans did at the time, they started funding newspapers that were in German only, so the Americans have difficulty reading them, where they were fostering political dissent and revolution. And they were promoting communism. Like, if you look at how May Day happened, which is the International Workers' Day, it was a revolt that was used and fostered by German newspapers. Like, it was a worker riot. And a couple of anarcho-communists, and yes, if you notice, you notice, they infiltrated the group, and then they threw a bomb into the police line, and the police line opened fire, because back then they didn't have water hosings, and no, like they flat out just opened fire into the workers, and it ended up with a massacre. And that's why it's called, that's why it's celebrated as the International Workers' Day. But the reality is, like, the communists incited the riot, the communists attacked the cops, And the communists were nowhere to be found when the cops opened fire into the workers. But my point is, like, this is something that has happened throughout the history of America. Like, the importing of cheap labor in order to get line go up is something that happened since before World War One. Putin is working with the Axis, the ruinous powers. Well, like Germany, it is. Britain's economy survived the 60s through 70s on American loans. Germany survived and prospered because we protected them from Russia, and France was France. Yeah, but that's only half of the story. Like, if I was to say, okay, well, America survived because France helped you up in the War of Independence. You guys managed to reunify the country because Britain didn't send troops in order to help the South. Like, I mean, you know, we can go with that if you want. But the reality is that the world is interconnected. It's not like, well, America just did this by itself. No, like, Europe and America has shared a strong connection in the past. And I think, like, it will share one in the future. Like, right now, the things are a little bit murky. But, like, take into account that one of the things that I keep hearing online, which is false, well, not necessarily it's false, but like, America saved Europe in World War II. And I don't really appreciate that thing because, like, they didn't do it from the kindness of their hearts. They did it because after the war, you guys became the world hegemon, and you wouldn't have been if you didn't get involved. Right? Because if you didn't get involved, what would have happened is that Russia would have saved Europe from the Nazis, but, like, no one would there be to save Russia from itself. And so Russia upgrading its technology and managing to, you know, field all of the World War II tech and their combat experience from actually being in the war zone, they would have dominated you militarily because the United States was in a Great Depression before that. And the Great Depression wouldn't have gone if you guys didn't go into the war. And so Russia would have dominated all the trade lines, all the maritime trades, everything. And the Cold War would have been with a Russian victory. You guys wouldn't even have the nuke. You wouldn't have the Manhattan Project if you didn't go into war. And not to mention, like, most of the Nazi scientists, the rocket scientists, they would have been captured by the Russians as well. Like, Operation Paperclip wouldn't have happened. No, like, Russia would have just became the world hegemon if the United States didn't get involved in the war. And they would have been, like, the superpower that America is right now. Like, everything would have been communism. And then they would probably try to subvert you. They would probably try to field, like, various factions, try to foster a civil war in the US. You know, like, operating from subversion, like, not actually getting involved. And once, like, something kicks off, once something happens, then they would join on one side or the other, supplying it with equipment, with funding. You could have joined the Germans. That's actually interesting. I don't know what would happen if you joined the Germans. I don't think, like, your country would have supported you if you joined the Germans, because that would mean fighting against the Brits. And at the time, like, a lot of Americans still liked the Brits. They were very popular. I don't know what would have changed if you joined with the Germans. I mean, your relationships with the rest of Europe would have been absolutely abysmal, right? Like, your relationships with the Russians would have collapsed. Your relationship with the Britain would have collapsed. And then you have the Germans. Like, the Germans were kind of like European Union on steroids, like you know, ignoring all of the human rights violations and stuff. Because, like, America is willing to deal with nations that have human rights violations, like Saudi Arabia. You guys can deal with China. You can deal with Russia. I mean, you dealt with the Soviet Union. They had human rights violations. But I'm thinking, like, from an economical and political perspective, like, now you manage to have Nazi Germany in Europe with the Nazi economy. It would have made trade incredibly difficult. I think you'd have gotten into a Cold War with Germany, and I think, like, that would actually be worse than a Cold War with Russia. Because communism has a system that destroys itself economically in time, while the German economic system is more like the Chinese one. So, like, on the long period, it doesn't guarantee that Germany would have collapsed like the Soviet Union did. So, like, even now, you'd probably still be in a Cold War situation. It doesn't matter if there's tons of German Americans. There's a lot more Americans that speak English, which connects them to the British. Silver Camera, no way Russia would have beaten back the Nazis without Lend-Lease and us destroying Germany oil and industrial capacity. I don't know. I really don't know what would happen. I think they would, because the winter was pretty fucking harsh. And the main problem was that Germany was running out of resources. So it was running out of oil, and that was like the main problem. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I'll think about it. But that would still lead to a situation where, like, okay, so now Germany controls the entire Europe, and you gotta deal with them, and you get into a Cold War with them, and the Cold War would probably be a lot worse than the one we had. The European Union is like the US, but on estrogen? No, absolutely false. The United States has, believe it or not, more of a unified culture. Like, a person from Wisconsin believes that he is an American. A person from Illinois believes that he is an American. A person from Poland believes that he is Polish. A person from Hungary believes that he is Hungarian. Like, the EU is something that, like, just sprung up, and it's, like, forced upon us. But, like, if you were to go back and ask, like, the European people, hey, do you want to actually unify in a super state? They would say no. But on top of that, the United States is democratic. The European Union is not. Like, I didn't vote for Ursula von der Leyen. You guys did vote for Donald Trump. The power that the Congress has in the United States is absolutely larger than the power than the parliamentaries have in the EU. Like, the Council, the European Council has all the power, and that's not democratic. That's bureaucratic. Americans would die for each other. See, like, that's interesting. Like, Polish people would die for other Polish people. Ukrainians would die for other Ukrainians. There's probably, like, some alliances. I can see Romanians dying for Poles. And I can see Poles dying for Romanians, depending on the conflict. But I can't see, like, people dying for Brussels. Like, the thing is, let's say there was a war between Russia and the European Union. The first thing you would see is, like, a lot of planes just flying. A lot of people would just get the fuck out. Meanwhile, if Russia was invading Poland, you'd see planes going back home. That's what I'm trying to say. You know, like, the same with America. Like, if, let's say by hypothetical reason, 100 years from now, the same mentality remains, but, like, the geopolitical shifts, and you have, like, Chinese forces invading America, like, you would have Americans from Europe flying back home to defend their country. That was one winter, and while Germany produced 150 planes a week, America produced nearly 300 a day, and that's only planes. No, I'm aware of the contribution that the United States had towards the war. But I still think Russia would win in the long run. I think it would have been a lot more gruesome for the Russian people. But I think they would manage to push them back. It's also interesting, like, maybe no one would win, right? Like, it would be possible that the Russians manage to push the Germans back, but they can't take Berlin. So, like, you end up with a stalemate. That would also be a possibility. I don't know. I really can't hypothesize what would happen, because it's way too complex. It can swing different ways. How is Brussels even a country with two languages? Well, it's the same like Canada. Like, it's not weird for places in Europe to have more than one official language. The US planes weren't of German and Japanese quality? Is this true? I always thought that the US planes were superior. I thought the Japanese planes were the most... well, no, the Russian planes, I think, were the worst. They were called flying coffins. The British planes were probably the best. And then you have, like, the Americans, and I thought the Japanese were the best types of plane. But I may be wrong, you know. So I thought that the Americans are better than the Japanese one. It kept Japan out of Russia. If they didn't, Germans would have had a lot easier time and Russia would have not been having it. Well, who knows? Anyway, like even if you're right and Germany wins, you end up in a situation with a Cold War between Germany, which is a country that had an actual like a more functioning economy, let's put it like this, and it wouldn't collapse itself like the Soviet Union did. And then you would probably get dominated on the seas. Like, they would be able to place embargoes on you. They would be able to force you to pay tariffs, so on and so forth. And the subversion element as well, right? Because then now you can actually have... I mean, the Nazi ideology would be far more subversive than the communist one, especially because the weak point in the United States is not class, it's race. And so, like, any ideology that sparks racial tensions, the United States is very vulnerable to that. Europe, not so much. Like, in Europe, it's not that big of a problem. Religion, apparently, is not also a problem in the United States. Like, you can't really push religious extremist view like the Cathars had, or no. But race is something that you want to use if you want to subvert the U.S. America no longer builds at World War II quality. The best plays in War Thunder are the German ones. Oh, that's interesting. The German-Soviet air. Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Because, like, in World War II, you didn't really have the same technology we have now, where people would just have abilities to constantly test and improve. It was pretty much like sink or swim, right? So, like, they're making a plane, and it's like you as a pilot have to fly it. Like, you have no simulator, you have no way to learn. You're literally just in the air, and you need to figure it out, or else you die. And so the Germans had a lot of time to modernize their air force by fighting the Brits. So I assume that the Brits and the Germans were actually the best plane makers. Zero was poorly armored and didn't have self-sealing fuel tanks. Yeah, I'm not an expert on the Air Force. I do know that with Japan, there's a hilarious situation where their military didn't agree with each other. So, unlike the Germans and unlike the Americans and the Brits, the Japanese were actually competing, like the Japanese branches of military were constantly competing with each other. And it was all about honor and prestige. And if they thought that you don't have the correct honor, then they would treat you poorly. And so there were three branches in the military. There was the terrestrial forces, the naval forces, and the air force. The terrestrial forces were considered to be the backbone of the military. Like, they already had the prestige, you know, because they're like the warrior class. The naval forces were also very prestigious because, well, they're the ones that open up the way for the terrestrial forces. But the Air Force was brand new, right? Like, it was new with new officers, and it lacked the respect. And so, like, these three divisions constantly worked against each other rather than with each other. This didn't end with, like, the reason why Japan lost the war, but it's an interesting historical fact. My father was 18 at World War II. I'm old. I asked him once, why did he let Eastern Europe be enslaved? He would not talk about it. Well, I mean, like, what the fuck do you expect him to say? It's not like he was a general. Well, even if he was a general, he wasn't a politician, right? I know why he let Eastern Europe get enslaved. So, like, for those of you who don't know, at the end of World War II, there was the question, like, what happens with the nations? And America and Russia agreed to allow Eastern Europe to have free elections. And it just so happens that every single country in Eastern Europe voted communism, right? So, like, that's how the Iron Curtain started. The reality is, of course, like, the elections were rigged. There were places where the Communist Party barely had 1,000 members, and now it managed to win with 70%. And so, why did that happen? Well, there was a thing called Operation Unthinkable. Churchill had it. Give me a second. Right. Churchill had this this idea, which was to arm all of the German prisoners of war, and send them to fight against the Russians. And at the time, a lot of Germans thought that this is going to happen as well, which is why like a lot of them would flee the Eastern Front in order to surrender to the Allies on the Western Front, because they thought that they're going to be armed and set to fight against the Russians. However, Winston's plan never got into effect, and probably it's a good thing, because then the Allies would be like, what the fuck is a T-24, and why are there 10 millions of them? It would have been like the start of World War III, which would have been probably devastating from a lot of points of view. But that's why they pretty much allowed Eastern Europe to be enslaved, because, well, they couldn't actually take on the Russians at the time. What Patton advocated for, yeah. Well, I guess like there were people in America that advocated for it. I knew about Churchill. You can Google Operation Unthinkable, and the reason that it was declined is because like the British command, they believed that they can't take on the Russians. Like literally, that's what they thought. Like even with the help of Americans, the general at the time believed that it's impossible to win against the Russians. Even with atomic bombs, like yeah, America had atomic bombs, but they couldn't. They weren't as powerful as they are now. They couldn't mass produce them. They were incredibly expensive, and you keep forgetting the number of Russians that exist in the real world. And it's like, okay, you bomb one city, you bomb two, and you just piss them off even more. And you can't really do like scorch earth on Europe. Because every bomb like also lasts there for another 100 years of radiation. And assumingly you don't want to push the world into Armageddon, well, they consider that it's not... Why is Mess so upset with YouTube? I keep seeing him cursing at YouTube. Yeah, more likely like the Soviets would have them as well. I don't know if they had them at the time. But chances are, like, the way technology works, right? Like, one country invents the tank, another country invents the tank as well. One country invents the airplane, the other country mimics it and has the airplane too. And so, yeah, it would have been possible that the Russians too would have eventually developed nuclear weapons. If America didn't supply the Soviets with equipment, it couldn't move like it did before, and the people in Eastern Europe would have rebelled against the Soviet Union. Yeah, but take into account that by the end of the war, the Soviets were capable of actually mass-producing their own shit. And take into account that they didn't have the technology we have now, so traveling between the continents was still slower. And America basically had to create a logistical chain over oceans, which is not... I mean, it's nice if you have the Russians as the allies, but in a world where you're having a conflict with the Russians, it's a lot more difficult. Russian engineers are very skilled at refinement, not invention. They don't have to invent. Here's the interesting part. It was like this is something that's told to me. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's kind of like a Romanian joke, which I think it may be true. Like there was this hold on, let me show you what I mean, because like I don't know the English word for it. So after the Iron Curtain fell, there was a convention which basically showed the technology from the Cold War, right? So like they were showing the rocket technology of what the Americans had and what the Russians had. And the Americans were baffled because the Russians apparently put on display a rocket that they shouldn't be able to have, because apparently mass producing it required technology that the Americans barely got. And so they're wondering, like, how the fuck did you mass produce that? And how did you make it? And apparently the Russians said, well, it was Ivan with the nail scratcher. So like the nail scratcher is like this type of tool, this thing, which basically, you know, it has like a sandy paper and you just like scratch, you know? So like they basically say that they didn't mass produce it in the sense of like having a factory that had the ability to create that. They just had one guy that was scratching there probably for like 12 hours a day for 5 years until they got the model right. Which, you know, the reason that it's a joke is because you could actually see the Russian doing that. The Soviet Union was industrialized because we helped them do it, and they stole the industrial capacity from Eastern Europe and the Air Force from US-made planes. Yeah, but we're talking about Operation Unthinkable. Like, it would be an attack on the Soviet Union after all of that happened. In America, mining a mountain with a sewing pin. Did they actually do that? I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Times back then were very tough. The Scots are the best inventors of the world. I think the Americans are actually some of the best inventors in the world. Like when it comes to invention, I would say America, Japan. I was actually shocked that Romania invented a lot of shit. Russia also invented a lot of stuff in genetics. Like a lot of the genetical experiments during the Cold War were pioneered by the Russians. They still have like a very strong industry when it comes to medicine. Like for instance, there was a pill that I wasn't allowed to say during the pandemic, but it's called Arbidol. I don't know how many of you have heard about it. It's not allowed in the European Union. But many of our politicians did take it in order to fight COVID. This is a pill that was developed in World War II. It's, I think it even got the Nobel Prize for it. It's an antiviral. It actually helps you against the common cold. From my understanding, the way it works is that the molecule of the virus binds itself to the medicine so that instead of binding itself to a cell and replicate it, it's just binding itself to the cell of this. Well, you haven't heard it because you're not in the Russian sphere of influence. But if you're in Moldavia, if you're probably even Ukraine, I think Ukraine had a factory for them. If you're in Russia, they're very popular. You can get them over the counter. Like, they're not unhealthy or anything. No, it's not meth. It's an antiviral. You can Google it. Google Arbidol. Again, you can't get it in the West. Because, like, probably regulations and shit. But you can get it in Moldavia. Yeah, it's not authorized in the European Union. They say it's not good for COVID. But I know for a fact that many Romanian politicians were taking it. Is it true peace in Ukraine means invading Europe? Like, no, where did you get that? That's not even on the table. And not to mention, like, if Russia can't take Kiev, how the fuck can it take Europe? The Japanese invented meth? Arbidol being available in the West would have meant less money for the vaccines. This is before the vaccine. This is way before COVID. Like, this type of medicine exists since the Cold War era. Like, again, you can go in Russia and you can get it over the counter. It's not a secret. It's not like a miracle cure or anything. It's basically used by people in Russia who get the common cold. Like, when you get the sniffles, you take this and the sniffles go away. He is right. Russia does have innovative medicine, mainly because no FDA. Probably. I don't know why. But, like, in the terms of genetics, they actually pioneered a lot of shit. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'm going to upload more videos now on my main channel and secondary one. Hopefully, I'll see you there. And what date is today? It's 18 Tuesday. Maybe I'll be on the Archcast this Friday. I don't know. By asking USA, Trump doesn't care about NATO, it's irrelevant what Trump thinks. Congress has the last word. And I think NATO is such a profitable grift for politicians both on the left and on the right that there's no way that I can see America pulling out from NATO. We'll see if I'm wrong or not. But usually I'm very right when assessing these situations. Will Romania vote the right way for president? Okay, the presidential candidate that a lot of people think he's a nationalist, he's a grifter. He worked for ESG shit. He worked with the progressives. Imagine if Vosh would come up running for president and Vosh is like this incredibly right-wing national. Would you believe him? That's the problem that I'm having in my country, and this is why I'm not backing or supporting any candidates. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the comment section. Take care.